Welcome to Rich Planet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. Do you recall that I have been asking the public to find first-hand witnesses of the Manchester Arena atrocity so I can speak to them? Do you also recall me recently saying this? Rich Planet does not take its lead from mainstream reporting. In fact, I could give you a list as long as my arm of the things that have appeared in mainstream media that I believe were put there as a direct result of the exposés that have been highlighted by Rich Planet. Now, this article is an example of the kind of thing I was talking about. Beware of social media during terror events, NHS guidelines warn. NHS staff and terror attack victims and their families have been warned about the risks of using social media in new guidelines issued by NHS England. The guide cautions that internet trolls may subject victims to vile and upsetting abuse, as was seen after the Manchester and London terror attacks. It also warns people to be wary of journalists seeking accounts of events. The process of retelling a story can make people relive the worst parts of horrific events, it warns. People may say more than they intend to when vulnerable, upset or angry, it adds. The NHS England guide also issues specific advice to younger people, cautioning people will use your information for their own ends, and when you're in the heat of the moment, you may say more than you intend to or later regret. The guide warns NHS staff against accidentally revealing something about the incident which is not already in the public domain. It says, often in terror incidents, the receiving hospitals are not named in the media straight away, so don't post that you've had a busy shift dealing with victims, as this will confirm something which isn't already known. Dear oh dear, what are they really worried about? It seems to me they are worried about the truth. Do you think these measures are about being altruistic and protecting victims? Bullshit. They are worried about independent people investigating these events because the mainstream media, who are censored by the intelligence agencies, never report accurately what happened. Staying on the theme of terrorism, I recently covered the Westminster Bridge attack. And you may remember that somebody placed a piece of plywood against the railings in front of the perpetrator's car. Here is an image of the car immediately after the crash. We see no piece of plywood. And here, a little later, we see the plywood in place. So who put it there? Nick Colostrom suggested this might have been deliberately put there to hide something, perhaps an undamaged railing. Now, I was recently contacted by a Rich Planet viewer who sent me some camera phone video footage of the person with the plywood. Here it is. Did you catch that? Here it is again, zoomed in and slowed down. It appears that the person who put the plywood in front of the vehicle is wearing a mask. An anonymous mask or a Guy Fawkes mask. What the hell is that about? Now then, just put yourself in the shoes of someone on that bridge. You've just seen a car mow down a whole load of people and then crash into the railings. A terrorist gets out with knives and runs off down the street. There are bodies all over the place. Some of them are dead. So what are you going to do? Are you going to help some of the victims? Are you going to warn people walking past that there's been a terrorist attack? No, of course not. You're going to find a piece of plywood. That's what you're going to do. You're going to find a piece of plywood, right? And then what you're going to do, you're going to get your anonymous mask, right? What on earth was this person doing? Was he part of the operation? Answers on a postcard to Rich Planet TV, P.O. Box, Bob Lazar. Now then, Stephen Hawking has been in the news again, Hooray! The 75-year-old Stephen Hawking. That's Stephen Hawking, who in 1963 was given 2 years to live. So he's only exceeded this prognosis by 52 years. If you want more on what I'm talking about, please follow this link. I suspect that Hawking died over 10 years ago and an impersonator is currently filling his wheelchair. I would guess that if he did die, it was somewhere between 1995 and 2006, but I'm open to debate on that part of it. Now, this is what Hawking recently said for an upcoming TV show. Should I say this is what the person pretending to be Stephen Hawking said? Or maybe I should just say this is what the person who programmed Stephen Hawking's voice box said. Now, I've got my own voice box here for added realism. Note here, I am not impersonating Stephen Hawking's. Therefore, I am not ridiculing him. I am impersonating an electronic box that you have no proof is being operated by the mind of the real Stephen Hawking. So don't come at me with that political correctness bullshit. This is what he said. I am convinced that humans need to leave Earth and make a new home on another planet. For humans to survive, I believe we must have the preparations in place within 100 years. It could be an asteroid hitting the Earth. It could be a new virus, climate change, nuclear war, or artificial intelligence gone rogue. That's what he said. Now, these are not the words of a scientist. I think everyone can agree on that. These are the words of a fearmonger. A fearmonger who isn't presenting any evidence of his ridiculous claims. The sooner this charlatan, whoever it is universally exposed, the better. If we do move to another planet, please, can Stephen Hawking be put first in the queue? I'll be happy to ignite the rocket and eject him, or whoever is impersonating him, into orbit around the sun. On today's show, I speak with Neil Sanders about the concept of fake news, the underhand manipulation of the internet and social media, and some of the dark forces behind Donald Trump and Brexit. On this programme, you might say we are engaged in a war. Not a war of ballistics, but a war of linguistics, a war of information. Language is a key part of the information war, and using certain buzzwords to discredit the other side is a common weapon. The word conspiracy theorist is one such word, and a new word on the block is fake news. I've spoken about this concept in a previous show, and here to analyse it further and try and answer what is really going on with it is researcher Neil Sanders. Welcome back, Neil.
Thank you very much for having me back.
Okay, we've all heard this word, fake news, and we're going to start off. There are different types of fake news.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, obviously the term fake news has become somewhat weaponised, which we'll come on to, but there are a number of things that could constitute fake news. You could have intentionally fake news, like either people putting out lies within the media to smear somebody, or propaganda, say from a political party or from a government, somebody trying to gain influence, influence, say, foreign policy or domestic policy or anything like that. And then you get this problem as well within modern journalism, which is basically to do with the fact that we have rolling news and we have social media, and basically we're in a sort of 24-hour cycle that you have to fill. You get two things. You get one which is called journalism and one which is called public relations. Now, people say, why are the Kardashians in every single paper? I don't want to see this. Why are they there? I'll tell you exactly why they're there. Because one of the main sources of mainstream news is not to send roving reporters out into the field, because frankly that's quite expensive. What they'll do is they'll go to PR companies, and PR companies will manufacture a story for them. Every time you see a celebrity doing a stretching exercise in a leotard in the park, It's a PR coup. It's selling a product. There's numerous times that you'll see advertisements for new wonder drug or something like that, and actually it's a sales pitch. The concept of journalism comes from the fact that basically, again, because of financial constraints, you won't have a lot of roving reporters out there. You'll have one reporter that's basically connected to a news wire like Reuters or AP or something like that. They'll be on the ground and they will decide what is happening in this story. They'll report it and they need to get it off as quickly as possible. They'll put this on the wire and then this will get sent around the world.
So so the first category of fake news is intentionally fake news, propaganda, and you're including this journalism in that, which is just kind of titillating nonsense.
Journalism is basically they'll take one party line that's come from one person who's on the scene and then just repeat that. They won't check the facts. They won't check who it is that's actually come from it. They'll just say, look, this is an official news source on the ground, and this is how lies can get repeated. So because if that particular reporter has made an error on the actual site, that gets repeated, and it will be days and days and days and days before anybody points out, hang on, that's not what's actually happened. Right. Whether, again, this is done on purpose sometimes or just by mistake is for debate. There is obviously, mistakes, badly researched articles from a dubious source. And I think this is particularly a problem with social media and the internet, because quite a lot of the time, as we've discussed before, it's a very strange sort of arena, social media, in as much as you've got an audience. You're basically trying to play to an audience to an extent, and to come out to this audience and go, yeah, by the way, all that stuff that I've been telling you, it was wrong because the source was wrong. I think that's quite difficult, and so you tend to get a lot of people would just basically continue with the same story, regardless of the fact that it might be poorly researched, in order to save face, so to speak.
All right, so the next category, so you've covered sensationalised.
Well, sensationalised is a slightly different one. It's the same principle, but what they would do with that is they'll put a quote like, Queen revealed to be a lizard, and you go, oh my God, that's amazing. And you read the story, and the story says, according to sources on the internet, the Queen has revealed herself to be a lizard. So the story doesn't actually say what the headline says. The headline is the sales for it. And they can use very, very, very sort of like manipulative language to not, if you read the story, they've not actually said that. They've said that somebody else has said that. Right. And this is projected. A hyper accentuated version of that is something that we see an awful lot, which is clickbait, which is essentially either made up stories or headlines that purposefully don't match the content of the story.
This would be purely the internet clickbait. It's trying to get you to click on something.
Yes and no. I mean, the same principle works for newspapers. If you see a sensational headline, you might pick the newspaper up off the stand or the magazine or whatever.
So a particular headline, I want that newspaper, you would also class that as clickbait?
Kind of. The point is that basically it's just a trap to get people to either buy that or that medium, or to go on that particular website, because a lot of sites get advertising revenue where the more clicks on the site, the more money they will make. So you'll get, there's a whole series of stupid, like Neon Nettle, for example, is one. It's a made up, they just make up stories. You just completely pull them out of whole cloth, but they sound sensationalist and interesting. Right. So basically, people will go onto it and they'll keep repeating it and repeating it and repeating it, and it's completely unsourced. In fact, it's not even completely unsourced. They've made it up. They've just made it up, and there's an awful lot of that on the internet.
Now, what about J-Trig and information which is intentionally planted to discredit either certain stories or people? Are they included in what you've just covered?
They can be, yeah. I mean, we'll come on to that. We'll come on to J-Trig later, because J-Trig is a very specific type of propaganda program that utilises all of these types of things. It utilises fake stories, fake gurus, fake leaders, and people to sort of to go behind. I think the important point, and something that people tend to sort of gloss over a lot of the time, is that all of these things, intentionally fake, badly researched, clickbait, sensationalism and stuff like that, they're prevalent in the mainstream media. We know that. We know the mainstream media has got, they lie, okay? But they're also very, very prevalent in the alternative media, and I think this is something that basically people don't, because I think the internet is still an emergent sort of like technology. I think a lot of people think it's international waters, and that basically it's a safe arena, and it's an arena where it's underground, it's away from the mainstream, and so you can source real information. And I don't think that's true. I don't think a lot of people realise that basically everything you do on the internet, you might as well write on a piece of paper and hand into your local police station, because every single thing you do is monitored by somebody. Like every site that you go on, every opinion, to very scary degrees, which we will come on to later. But absolutely, I mean, the influencing of opinion is very important. The Pentagon, for example, there's something that they did. They've got over 150 different personnel that appear on news media, say Fox News or whatever. Now, ostensibly, these people are supposed to be completely impartial. They're just somebody who's an expert on the situation that will be able to give a military bearing on whatever is happening in the world politics or whatever. What you actually see is that basically this is a direct line from the Pentagon spinning propaganda. They're there as an agent of psychological operations in order to spin it favourably or to disguise information that they don't want to be released. I mean, the mainstream media, we know the mainstream media has got a lot of problems. We could list a dozen stories. Belgian babies being amputated during the First World War, Q80 incubators, 45 minutes, weapons of mass destruction, al-Zarqawi linked to al-Qaeda in Iraq. None of these are true. Bin Laden's underground cavern, all the stuff that came from Curveball. We know that the media is inclined to spit out rubbish. And what's very strange is it's becoming quite a lot. A lot of this is becoming very, very influential on public life. For example, the top 20 provably fake stories during the recent US election were shared far, far more than the top 20 provably true stories. And it could be said that basically fake stories were actually more prevalent in decision-making than real stories. And what's really weird is if you look at a lot of these supposed clickbait articles and stuff like that, fake news, whatever you want to call it, there's an agenda behind it. Somebody's sending these out. They're using things called AI bots, which is basically like spamming entire sort of areas. And they're doing it, somebody set up this technology which is not easy to set up, and they're doing it in order to specifically spread this information in specific areas. There may be a reason for that, which we'll come on to later. But I mean, just an example of that, there's this town in Macedonia called Veles, right, okay? And it's known locally as Trump Vale, because during the election, basically, there was 7 businesses set up there, and all they were doing, they were hiring hundreds and hundreds of local people, particularly like students and such like that. And all that they were doing was getting them to write fake anti-Clinton, pro-Trump stuff. Right. Like all these stories, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fake stories about Clinton and fake stories about Trump, but being positively spun to Trump and then sent out via these AI bots all over the world. Now, what's really strange about this is that these companies, it's not entirely clear who's behind them, and they claim to have absolutely no political affiliation, which seems very, very, very strange. They definitely had business connections that showed that money from advertising revenue was making its way back to the US. That's not illegal. It's desperately underhanded and dishonest, but it's not actually illegal. And there was again, there was a lot of fake anti-Trump stuff as well. It's just that basically we can actually prove that this one particular village was set up specifically for that.
Just as a side comment, I mentioned Michael Desarian, a comment on how much effort has to be put in when you're watching television. It requires no effort.
Yeah.
So you don't even have to move. All you have to do is have your eyes open and be conscious. It takes no effort. Maybe click the remote control. And the internet really is like that now, isn't it?
Oh, it's more so.
And the mouse has become what the remote control used to be. and it takes no effort to sit there browsing. It's just very similar to watching
and there's
TV.
far more messages. You're multi-screening when you're on the internet.
Yeah.
Like, you know, just take a Facebook page. There's about 27 different pieces of information that are all going on. That's all being absorbed. You might not subconsciously take it in, but you see the same headline again and again and again and again. Repeat a lie often enough, it becomes the truth. You put people into a scenario whereby basically they don't know what is true and don't know what's not true and can't discern it, and people start to become more malleable and accepting of anything and going more towards, say, party lines or political bias or something like that, to give themselves more psychological comfort than to actually find the truth.
Right.
And this is really, really sort of dangerous. And like, regarding the concept of fake news, I personally think that Trump is a master of fake news, and that is not a compliment by any stretch of the imagination. If someone in the third world was using the tactics that Trump is using at press conferences, everyone would go, oh, well, he's a dictator. Okay, fair enough. He's using control of the media. Now, let me explain, because this is connected. This is going to be a running theme that's going through this thing. This is connected to two people, which is Steve Bannon and Robert Mercer, and also, to a lesser degree, the multimillionaire William Regnery II. They're going to be coming up quite a lot in this, basically. Mercer is the main financier of the Trump campaign. We will come back to this in more detail. He's also the owner of Breitbart, which is the news outlet that Steve Bannon was the editor-in-chief, and he's now gone back to after resigning as aide to Trump. They also finance Nigel Farage. Nigel, 350 million quid a week for the NHS Farage. He's sponsored by Robert Mercer. So there's a whole sort of like a cavalcade of these quite right-wing people that are connected through organisations like Goldman Sachs, which Bannon used to work for. Nigel Farage is an ex-broker. He's not a man of the people by any stretch of the imagination. And basically, there's a whole sort of series of right-wing media nodes that are sponsored by Mercer and William Regnery through things like the MPI and various other things. And they basically spit out this particular line of propaganda, essentially. Now, just to give you an idea, right? This is a quote about Mercer, and then I'll explain the point. Some see Mercer as emblematic of a major shift in American politics has occurred since 2010, when the Supreme Court made a controversial ruling in Citizens versus Federal Election Commission. That ruling and several subsequent ones removed virtually all limits on how much money corporations and non-profit groups can spend on federal elections and how much individuals can give to the political action committees. Since then, power has tilted away from the two main political parties and towards a tiny group of mega-rich donors. Private money has long played a big role in American elections. When there were limits on how much a single donor could give, however, it was much harder for an individual to have a decisive impact. Now, a single billionaire can write an 8-figure check and not just put their thumb but their whole hand on the scale, and we often have no idea who they are. Suddenly a random billionaire can change politics and public policy and sweep everything else off the table, even if they don't speak publicly and there's no public awareness of their views. Just to give you an idea of the sort of person that Robert Mercer is.
So when did the rules change?
2010.
Right.
Okay, just to give you the sort of person that Robert Mercer is. Robert Mercer has argued that the Civil Rights Act in 1964 was a mistake. Okay, he wants to deport all black people, and he feels that basically they were better off when they were slaves. Now, obviously, you know, most historians will tell you that this is true. He also is of the opinion that there's no white racism. There's no racism from white people to black people in America. And bizarrely, he includes white supremacists, the KKK, and racist organisations. So the guy's obviously a bit of a lunatic. The point of the fake news and how Trump used it very much like a dictator. During the election, those fake news stories that we're talking about, Hillary Clinton's got the cannibal disease, Hillary Clinton's got a brain tumour, Hillary Clinton's dying of X, Y, and Z, she's got Parkinson's disease, all of those. Where did they come from? They came from all the right-wing outlets that Mercer sponsors, Breitbart, Drudge Report, InfoWars, all of these that he's basically inputted money into and influence over the past few years. So the term fake news was actually appropriated before the election. The second that Trump gets into office, anything that goes against the party line, what Trump says, the line of the official White House, is fake news. And just like that, half the alternative media have decided that the official White House line is true, and that the mainstream media is not true. I appreciate that the mainstream media is full of crap, but let's look at the things that have been exposed by them: the My Lai massacre, Jimmy Savile, the expense scandal. You know, there's lots and lots of things that the broader spectrum of media, the more room you have for Seymour Hersh's and Carl Bernstein's and stuff like that. What Trump is doing with this concept of weaponized fake news is he's reduced it to one single line of news, which is essentially Trump or Trump-associated outlets like Breitbart. And that is incredibly clever, but incredibly troubling. Because, as I say, if this was happening anywhere else in the world, people would go, that's quite a dodgy tactic. That's the tactic that a dictator would use.
So you think there's some very wealthy people who are going to somehow, what are they going to gain by supporting him? They're going to gain more wealth, you think?
I think they've used him as a conduit for what they want. There's people like William Rosemary II and Robert Mercer, and basically what they both believe is that they want a white ethno-state in America. I mean, certainly William Regney wants that. Robert Mercer claims not to be a white supremacist, but everyone that's worked for him claims that he is a white supremacist, and he comes out with statements like the Civil Rights Act should never have happened. So I think what essentially they've done is they've tried to sort of build a node of what could be considered alternative media, which is actually alt-right media, portraying itself as alternative media. And all it really does is give propaganda that props up Trump, because they've presented him as a man of the people and you know, the saviour. He's going to go against, you know, the establishment. They took the fact that people were rightly annoyed and disenfranchised by the elites, by the mainstream, and they basically utilised this figure as a way to actually to get in. What's strange about it is he still talks to CNN. He still talks to the failing New York Times. And now we know the CIA have got like a vested interest in the media. Like, I don't buy all this backwards and forwards. I think it's a very clever tactic that basically makes CNN fans or whatever go, oh, well, if he rejects CNN, I'm going to like CNN more. And it makes Trump fans go, well, we know CNN are lying. We're going to go with what Trump says. I think it just keeps people fighting.
I'll just read this list of questions that you've written here as a possibility as to what Trump is. Is Trump playing a buffoon like Bush so he can get away with stuff? You've said possibly. Is he being used to usher someone else in as a response? Possibly. So they've got a second candidate lined up,
like
I think.
Like Pence or somebody like that.
Right. Is he being used to undermine the office of president in the eyes of the public? Possibly. Is he being used to erode trust in the government and get everyone used to constant, ever-changing lies coming from the government? Possibly. Now, do you think all of those questions that you've asked there point to him being the CIA's choice?
Well, I think that basically he's just a useful idiot. I don't think that I think Trump's being used by people behind him because he's the sort of arrogant blowhard that really thinks he can do anything without much effort. I think he just thinks he can walk through this particular job. And I think a lot of people have seized on that and taken advantage of it. Whilst he's spitting fake news, it's been proven that basically in the first 6 months, the office of the White House, Trump himself made 400 provably false statements in the first 6 months. If you count the repetitions of those false statements, it's over 1,000. Right. Okay. But why was Trump chosen? Well, what a lot of people don't look at is the WikiLeaks dump. If you can remember the WikiLeaks dump that happened, right, there were several facts that came out of this that people just, for whatever reason, just didn't seem to follow up. The DNC conspired against the voters to get the People's Choice Bernie Sanders off the card so that Hillary Clinton could be, which is incredibly, it goes against the whole point of having a political affiliation if basically they're going to say, yeah, we've taken that, we've put a pin in it, and we're just going to ignore what you say. They conspired with the media to promote Clinton. They gave her questions in advance. They wanted to make her appear to be a better candidate. If she wasn't a completely terrible person, she might have actually won, because basically they had a lot of influence with the media and stuff like that. It's just that she's such a despicable representative of a human being that most people were just like, no, I just can't do that. They also conspired. Now, here's the really strange thing. The DNC conspired with the media to promote Trump. Mm-hmm. Why? Why did they do that?
Because they thought he was a liability for the other side.
Absolutely, because right at the beginning, he was failing. I know that people, this is again one of the lies that came out. I'm self-financing this campaign, blah, 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 blah. He was dying on his arse right up until the point where basically the DNC started promoting him because they
So you think originally he started out as a joke character, like a rodeo clown?
Absolutely. This is proven by the emails going backwards and forwards with the WikiLeaks. So basically they wanted to promote him because they felt that they could easily beat him because he's an imbecile, that says ridiculous things. This is what they felt. Now this really backfired because the problem was what they did was they basically got Trump, name recognition, at which point Robert Mercer, the billionaire, shifts all of his attention, takes Steve Bannon, Kellyanne Conway, Rebecca Mercer, the Mercer Foundation, and all these various other nodes that are connected to him, removes them from support of Ted Cruz, and then starts basically backing Trump.
Right. So you said before that you thought that these financiers have been involved in Brexit as well.
Well, they are. Yeah, they certainly are with regards
Farage, with the pro-Brexit.
Yeah. Yeah, they certainly
right. So, do you think then that this nationalism is going to be made to fail and collapse, and that's possibly a New World Order tactic?
I don't know. I don't know what the plan is. All I know is that this nationalism, as you call it, is what these particular millionaires and multimillionaires and billionaires want. And as we're going to discuss later, they're not just individuals that are on their own. They have specific connections to the White House, British military psychological operations, US Marines, Marconi Defence, and the Pentagon.
But you've got other, let's say, oligarchs who are hell-bent on a world power structure.
Possibly.
Are they at odds with the groups that are making the campaigns more nationalistic, do you think?
I'm sure that there's people on both sides that have agendas and stuff like that. It's just that some are better at spinning these things than others. I mean, and one of the things, it's interesting that you're saying about this nationalism, because one of the things that certainly seems to be coming out of this is a push towards extremes of either the left or the right. You're getting, say, the rise of things like the alt-right, or you're getting the rise of social justice warriors on the other side.
Well, we've had the incident last week with the car at the rally, and that's just stoking the whole far right argument, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's there's a lot of that, but if you look at who's pumping millions into promoting the far right, provably, admittedly, Robert Mercer, Steve Bannon, William Reggie.
Is that because they genuinely believe in those principles?
William Reggie wants a white ethno-state. He doesn't want black people in America. Right. Robert Mercer is the same. This attitude is surprisingly prevalent among very, very wealthy people. Now, what's interesting is with the concept of, say, that's interesting what you're saying about the thing, because I am of the opinion that, say, social justice warriors, this shrieking left, this shrieking offended by everything, is actually more favourable to the right wing. Because what it does is it basically turns people off. It goes, oh, God, for Christ's sake, will you shut up? And they'll go this way. So you could see it as almost like a sort of a Gladio type response. Do you know what I mean? Like in essence, it's like a false flag. The best way to defeat a cause is to defend it badly, said Nietzsche. So basically, if you're doing that, then what's interesting is both sides of the debate, the far left and the far right, it's just victim culture. It's like a fight to see who's the most oppressed. It's a victim culture echo chamber. Oh, we're oppressed as white males. Oh, we're oppressed as LGBTs. Oh, we're oppressed as a young black man. Oh, we're oppressed as this. There may be an element of truth to it, but basically it is just victim culture, and that's incredibly powerful because victim gives you an excuse. It's not my fault that I've done badly in life. It's all these other people and the system set up against me. And there may well be an element of truth to that. But in a lot of these cases, it just screams inferiority complexes. Right. And I think that very, very wealthy people who've got knowledge and money of psychological operations and power are stoking this division.
So do you think then, Neil, that the lines that are drawn to put people in pigeonholes, identities, and then create politics over those identities, identity politics.
Yeah.
The people don't realise that they're being shoved in whatever group, and then they're being made to hate other groups.
Yes,
deliberately.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of spin that basically is saying, this is the problem with the world, and it just so happens to be the opposite of you.
Right.
And as we'll come on to later, I think this is far, far more organised than a lot of people will say.